Hi, my name's Jeffrey Way, and today we are going to convert a PSD that we learned how to design from Web Design Tuts, and we're going to convert that into HTML and CSS. So if you're not familiar, the Tuts Plus newest site, webdesign.tutsplus, is our sister site. So they focus exclusively on the design side of working on the web, creating menus, creating ribbons, creating the designs for a website, while NetTouch will focus almost exclusively on the front-end development work of that, coding it, working with JavaScript, working with PHP and databases, etc. So this will be a multi-part series. We've covered part 1 on Web Design Tuts, and this details the process of creating this nice and fun design. Now, over the course of the next 4 episodes, we're going to create markup, we're going to write JavaScript, we're going to write CSS. So without further ado, let's get started. Here is the final coded version. We need to do a little bit more work to work on the fonts, but we're going to work on that later. But you can see it's a very simple app. We have some nice fun CSS3 transitions in play here, like so. We're doing shadows, so you're going to learn how to do a lot of stuff. And then we'll also do some JavaScript work like adding transitions and such. So it should be fun. All right, I'm going to close all of this out and let's get started. I've created a new folder here called site name. And to begin, I'm going to go ahead and drag this into MacVim. However, before we do, let's go ahead and create the folder structure for what we need. So I find that doing it in the terminal can sometimes be easier. So we begin, I want to have, of course, an index.html file, and I want to have a JavaScript folder as well as an images folder. And we should also have a CSS folder as well. So let's CD into the JS folder, and let's touch a scripts.js file. Next, let's go into the CSS folder, and again, I'm going to touch a style.css folder. And if I close that out, now we have our entire markup. Very cool. All right, so let's get into coding this, and we'll try to do this quickly for you. So I'm going to open this up in my favorite editor, MacVim. And we're going to start with a clean slate. So the first step, of course, is to start with some kind of text snippet. Always don't repeat yourself for every project. So that's why I recommend using a tool if you're a Mac user like Snippets, or for PC there's a variety as well. And I'm going to insert my beginning boilerplate. So I'll look for boilerplate. And we'll quickly go over this. There's a lot of cool things here. So we begin by using the new HTML5 doc type that everybody can use. Older browsers will simply fall back to standards mode. This is a tool. This is from Stoyan's site, phpid.com. And it's just a way to improve performance in certain situations, so be sure to refer there. This line right here ensures that we're using the latest IE rendering engine, no matter what. This will reference our favicon that'll be displayed within the address bar of your browser. Here, the Apple Touch icon. If you're an iPhone user or even an Android user, if you want to add a web page to your home screen, this line right here will allow you to specify which image is used, and you'll want to use a high-res kind of a square icon for that. Make sure you name it Apple Touch icon. Here we're referencing our style.css file. And then here, we can target handheld, so we can target the mobile browsers that are really not up to snuff, like compared to the iPhone or BlackBerry or Windows Phone. These are for the older phones, so that you can provide a very basic one-column layout. And then here, we're also referencing Remy Sharp's HTML5 shiv, or you might have heard it referred to as the shim. And the basic idea behind this is we want to use the new HTML5 elements, so nav and header and section and footer. However, IE has some issues with that, where it doesn't really understand what they are, so it just doesn't display them correctly. But there's a trick where with JavaScript, if you call document.createElement header, it will miraculously trigger Internet Explorer into understanding what it is. So what Remy Sharp did was he created a very small script that will take care of this for us. And it also fixes some issues when printing, where you would have issues before where printing a document would screw up the layout. This will take care of that as well. And that's it. We're also referencing jQuery for in the future. And I'll make sure I change that to the most recent version of jQuery 1.4.4. All right, so let's take a look at our design. This is what we have here that the creator Mahmoud designed. And if we want to check this out, first thing you should always do is figure out what the width is of your project. And if I measure here, you can see it's 960 pixels. So he's working with the 960 grid system, and we can get that. So that's the first step. Let's go to 960.js. If you're not familiar with this, I created a screencast on it, and you can refer right here, and I go over exactly how to use the 960 framework. But don't worry, if you've never used it before, I'll teach you how to do it in these videos as well. All right, so let's go to the top, and I'm going to download it to my desktop, and it's created by a man named Nathan Smith. So here, let's unzip this, and we want to go in here, and the main files that we need are going to be located within the code folder. So I'm going to grab that, and these are the demos, so we don't need the demos. I just need the CSS files. Now, if we come back to our project, we can see that the creator, Mahmoud, he's using the 24 column grid, not the default 12 column grid. So here, I need to grab the 24 version of the 960 framework, and he also includes a reset file. It's just a base reset, pretty common. And then he also has a typography style sheet that'll just kind of get you up and running again with some basic typography on your website. So we're going to copy all of those, and I'm going to paste them into my CSS folder like so. Now, one thing you want to be careful about is here, you don't want to have too many HTTP requests, and this is where the web browser is having to load multiple style sheets. So it's a good practice to, upon deployment, group all of these into one single style sheet. So let's go back into our editor and let's reference these files. So you want to make sure at the very top is we first reference the reset file, then the 960 framework, then the typography file, and then our custom style sheet. So to do this, to speed up time, I'm going to take advantage of a plugin for Vim and a couple other editors called SparkUp, but you might also have referred to the original version as Zen coding, and it's simply a way to write or to create HTML rapidly fast. So if you'd like to learn more about that and you've never used it before, go to NetTuts and search for NetTuts SparkUp. You could search for that one right there, or you could also search for Zen coding, and I have a video on that as well. But if you've never used it, don't worry, it doesn't really affect this. It's just a way for me to code faster. So we'll begin by referencing reset.css. So link, and the rel is a style sheet, and the href is going to be css/reset.css. Now if I extend that, you see that SparkUp will turn that into HTML markup. It's very convenient. So we're going to do another one. Rel equals style sheet, and this one needs to link to the 960 framework. So CSS 960 24 call.css. And let's do the last one. Again, rel equals style sheet, and the href is css/text.css. And looks like I had a mistake right there, so I'll get rid of that. And now we're all set to go. So if I run this in the browser, you're not going to see anything just yet because we have no code on our page. So that's the first step. Let's go into our Photoshop file, and I'm going to hide the grid for now. And let's quickly take a look at the way this works. So we begin by, we have this container, a container for the entire area. But there's one problem here is, if you've ever sliced a design before, you might be familiar with taking the background and doing something like this. And then what you do is you repeat that for the entire width of the browser, and ta-da, you have your background. But there's one problem with this. What happens if the person who uses your theme or your template, they add more than one paragraph right here? Maybe they have 3 paragraphs. Well, at that point, this little banner area is going to extend beyond that gray polka dot background, and it's going to look really strange. So we need to compensate for that and make sure that this background right here itself can extend for as much as possible. So we cannot hard code that in. So that's something we need to keep in mind, is have wrapping divs for our container. All right, next, if we zoom in, we have our header area. This has a logo, and then we have navigation, and then a form. And then we have a banner section, okay, all pretty standard. Then we have our main content area, and the main content area is separated into 2 blocks. So we have our primary content right here, and then we have the sidebar, or the HTML5 element aside could be used there, ASIDE. So pretty simple. And then we have our footer right here, and that's separated into 3 columns for a form, recent projects, the Twitter stream, and then kind of this more traditional footer at the very bottom. And again, we repeat the navigation area. All in all, it's a very simple project, and we're going to get started building that right now. So let's begin by creating the header. And I'm not going to worry about working with the 960 classes in this particular lesson. If you come back to a future lesson, we'll implement that, so I can dedicate a whole lesson to adding those classes and understanding how and why it works. So for now, we're going to create our header element, and we need to have an h1 tag. And the value of this h1 tag is site name. Next, if we come back, and this is how you convert a design. You just go back and forth. So next we have the navigation area. So I'm going to use the new HTML5 element nav. And nav is going to contain an unordered list. And this unordered list will have, let's see how many list items. 5 list items. So I'm going to do times 5. And each list item will have an anchor tag. And the href, we're not building a full website, so the hrefs will just go to the #. And now we need to give a value to each one. And you know what? I'll keep it like that is. So you'll see that SparkUp will create all of this markup for me. Very helpful. So we need home, about, portfolio, blog, contact. Home, about, portfolio, blog, and contact. Now there's something I want you to be aware of is notice how in the PSD, Mahmoud, the creator, is using all uppercase. And I'm going to do that here. However, it's not necessary, and maybe it's even a better practice to type it just normal, and then you can use CSS text transform to turn all of these letters into uppercase. So that's something to keep in mind. Alright, so now we've taken care of our logo and our navigation area. The next step is to build this little social networking links within the header area. So we have a couple options. In this case, why don't we use the menu? This is another new HTML5 element. Within here, we're going to have a UL with an ID of head social. That sounds fine. And let's see how many links we have. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll do 4. Each list item will have an anchor tag, again, linking to nowhere. And then the anchor tag is going to have a value. Actually, the anchor tag should have an image as well, because we don't want to place these social networking icons as the background of our project. So I'm going to make sure I add those in as well. So we'll do an image, and the source equals nothing for now. We'll add that later when we slice our design. And we'll also do an alt. So if I expand that again, we can add these in. So we'll begin by assuming what the final path names will be, and then if we need to later, we can change that. So we'll begin with saying, let's put these in the images folder and an icons folder. And the first one will be facebook.ping. All right, the next one's going to be images, icons, and the next one, I believe that was dribble. All right, the next one is going to be images / icons / twitter.ping. And then the final one is for Flickr, so we'll do that one, Flickr. All right, and that takes care of that section. So we come back, now we need to take care of the form, the search form that we see right here. So we'll do that after our menu element. And we'll keep it simple, form. We'll do the action equals nothing because we're not building a fully functioning form right now. And we'll also do the method. This could be post or get mostly, so we'll keep it to get. Don't worry about that right now if you're not familiar with server-side languages. And now within the form we'll have a paragraph tag, and this paragraph tag will have a value of search. Or, you know what, let's first put in our input. So this input is going to have a type of text, and we'll give it a name of search, and maybe an ID of search as well. And that looks good. So we also need to give this a value. So you have a couple options here. We can hard code it in like so, search. Or if you want, place search as the value of the input or the text. Now the only problem here is when the user clicks on that input, they would then, unless we add some JavaScript to it, have to manually delete that search text from it. Another option is to use an HTML5 attribute, placeholder. And what this will do, and it's only implemented in WebKit and Opera browsers at the moment. So if I view this in the browser, it's not going to work in Firefox just yet. But the way placeholder works is when you're not focused on that particular input, it'll display something. And as you can see here, it's not displaying in Firefox. But if I go into Chrome, it displays that. And then as soon as you click on it, it'll disappear. So this is the nice thing about some of the HTML5 attributes is they degrade gracefully. There's nothing wrong with using them. Firefox users simply won't get that. But don't rely on it 100% because in Firefox, if we did not have this label right here, we wouldn't know what this input box was for. So always keep that in mind. Okay, so let's come back. And we have our form. That should be fine right now. We could put that in a label if we wanted to, but no need to for the time being. So the next step is to work on our banner. So if I scroll out, you can see that we have this banner area. And remember earlier I told you we have to make sure that the background of this banner can extend vertically as much as it needs to for as much text as you have here. So I need to make sure that I have a wrapping div, maybe banner wrap, and then an inner div, and that inner div will be the centered section that we see right here. All right, so let's begin working on that. I can get rid of header, or I'm not get rid of it, but I can finish that up. And let's continue. So div ID equals banner wrap, and inside of it we'll have our inner banner. So div banner. Now this inner banner is going to have a heading 2 tag, so we'll begin by adding that. And the value of this heading 2 tag is going to be welcome to our site. What else do we have? So then we have these featured images. Now each of these is going to be its own image so that they can be changed dynamically. So I'm going to make sure that they're wrapped within their own divs so that we can position them if we need to. So we'll do div featured, and this div is going to have 2 images. And each one is going to have a source, and for now we'll just give it an alt of featured. And if we extend that, that's been added. So we'll begin by, again, just guessing something. We'll call it featured img1, and the next one img featured img2. And then we can change that if we need to. So that takes care of our featured section. Next we need to add this text. So we'll go ahead and add that now. And we'll have, let's do 2 paragraphs of text, so p times 2, and I'm going to add a text snippet for a short snippet of lorem text. And now that's been added. So you can see using a program like Zencoding or SparkUp can save you so much time, and I highly recommend you use it if you're not already. Let's come back, and now I need to add 2 buttons and then finally the breadcrumbs. So here we'll just do it manually, and we'll say button, and the first one is called Learn More. Alternatively, we could use an input with a type of submit. And then this next one is going to be our work. So let's come back, and if we come into Firefox, refresh the page, we're starting to get there. Everything's looking really good. So the next step is, let's get these breadcrumbs out of the way. So at the bottom, let's just place it within a p tag for now, and we'll give it an ID of breadcrumbs just in case we need to access it later. And within here, we'll give it a value of your here. If we come back, we can see that there's a home link and a welcome link. So we're just going to put these in like so, home, and then welcome. And we can make these prettier if we need to later. So I need to wrap each home and welcome within links, presumably. So surround tag, and we'll surround it within an anchor tag. And then I'm going to do the same thing for welcome, like so. So let's come back in Firefox, make sure that was done correctly. Okay, that looks just fine. All right, what's next on the list? Let's come down, and now we can work on the main content area, which is going to have the primary content and this aside area. So we'll do that right now. So after our closing div, and if you want, you can mark it end banner wrap. Now we can begin working on the main content section. So we'll do div main, and within here we need to have 2 elements. So we have the primary section, and then we're also going to have the aside section, like so. So within primary, we have first from the blog. We'll do h3, and we'll call it from the blog. All right, next we're going to have these article sections, as you can see here. So there's one article, and there's another article. So in that case, let's use appropriately the HTML5 article element. The article is first going to have the heading, so that'll be an h2, and that's going to have an anchor tag within it, and we'll just give it a value of blog post name here. All right, what's next? We have right here Now we could wrap that in one of the new HTML5 elements, and we very well might in a future lesson. But for now, let's keep it simple, and we'll just use an H6 tag for now. So we do H6, and that value is going to be May, or what is it, December 7th, 2010. And we'll also give it the time, or I'm sorry, the number of comments, 10 comments. All right, that looks good for there. So also 10 comments, presumably that would link to the specific posting and to the comments section. So I'm going to surround that with an anchor tag as well, so that could be populated. All right, so we have that. So now we have our main image. So I'll go ahead and add that. And for now, source, I'm just going to link it to, we'll say, post image, something generic like that, and we can change it later. Alt blog post title here. And then finally, we have a paragraph of text. So we'll do that again, P lorem. Now we also have this section continue reading, so I'm going to add that as well. So we'll extend that, and right here we'll say continue reading ... So if we come back to Firefox, we have from the blog, and then we have our contained article. So what I'll do now is I'm going to duplicate this, and we're going to paste it in, I don't know, say 2 more times. So we have a total of 3 postings, right? And there we go. Now we have those 3 postings. So what's next? Now we need to, let's come back, and we do have the blog at the very bottom. You see this button right here? So I'm going to go ahead and add that. So we'll paste it right before this closing content area. And again, we'll do button the blog. All right, so that should take care of the main content area. Next, I want to work on the aside. And here we have 2 things. We have the tabs. However, we have to think about what if JavaScript is disabled. So I want to present a nice layout even in those cases. And then we have these little widgets, which is a heading and then some text, etc., etc. Should be pretty easy. So we'll begin by working on the tabs area. So we'll say create a UL, and we'll give it an ID of comments. And first, we will, let's come back. So we have a paragraph and then a heading tag. So we'll do that. And within it, we'll have a P with the value of lorem. And then also, we need to have an H6 tag. And that value is going to be posted by someone, and then the name of the tutorial on Photoshop tutorial. Okay, so that looks okay. So now I need to, again, wrap this, surround tag, and we'll wrap it in a blank anchor tag for now. And then maybe also someone would be a username, so you could do that as well, but I'm not going to worry about that in this particular case. So that looks fine. That should cover everything. We can grab this list item, yank it and copy it again, and that'll take care of that section. But we also need to take care of the tab headings, as you can see right here, comments, categories, and archives. So I'm going to do that at the very top of our aside right here. And we'll call it UL and give it an ID of tab headings so that I can target it. And there are 3 list items, and each one is going to link to a different section. So the way a tab system works, or most, is that this will link to, say, hash comments, and then that will bring up the element that has an ID of comments, and then this one will link to pound archives, and that'll bring up the element below that has an ID of archives, and that's how it works. So that's what we're going to do here, and we'll give this a href of, and we'll fill that in later. So I'm just going to keep that blank by default, and that should do it. So the first one is going to be comments, and we'll give that a value of comments. The next one is going to link to the categories section, and the final one is going to link to the archives section. So don't worry if this is confusing you. We'll go over it together shortly. All right, so let's go back to Firefox. The only thing you should be doing in your browser at this point is just making sure that you don't have any unclosed tags. All right, let's come back, and now what do we need in Photoshop? So now we need to build the categories area. So when Mahmoud designed this, to the best of my knowledge, she didn't show how the categories and archives section should look. So I'm going to style those as just a simple list. So first, within here, we'll do H4, and this next one will be categories, and we'll do a UL with an ID of categories, and we'll give them, let's say, 6 list items, and each one is going to have an anchor tag linking nowhere. And we'll simply just write category. Looks good to me. Scroll there. Yep, that's fine. We can fill that later if we want to. And then let's do the last one, and that's for archives, right? So again, UL, give it a name of archives. And list item, again 6, and a value of archive. All right, let's check that out. Come back, refresh, and now we have all of those. So we're streaming through this really fast. That's great. So now we need to do the who we are section. So we have a heading, and then notice I said this section. So when you can say that, generally you can use the section element. So we have a heading, and then we have an image, and then a paragraph of text. That should be simple. Let's come into MacVim, and before we're done with the aside, we're going to create a new section element, and this will have a heading 3 tag of who we are, and then we need to have that image, and the source for now we'll call it who we are.jpg, and we'll create that later and give it an alt again of who we are. Now we also need to have a paragraph with some generic lorem text again. So fill that out, and now we have our little widget there. So if we come back, that should be fine. Next, let's scroll to the bottom, and we do have this read more link, so I'll add that right now. All right, so let's come back again, and now I need to create the sponsor section. So we have a heading, and this will have a list of our sponsor images. Very common, even NetTouch has this. So we'll do another one, section, and we'll give it an ID of sponsors just in case we need to target it. We can always remove it later. And heading 3 will be sponsors. So we'll have a UL again with list items, and how many? I think Mahmoud did 2. And each one, of course, needs to link somewhere. And the anchor tag is going to wrap an image right here. So this image, we'll give it a source of, we'll fill that in later, and give it an alt as well. So I'll scroll down and fill this information in, and that'll link to nowhere for now. And the source is, let's say, img/codecanyon.net. And I'll do the exact same thing again so that I can promote my marketplace. Just kidding. But not really. Okay, so if we scroll down, there is our sponsors section. Cool. So now we've done the main content area, and we're just bursting through this really fast. Now we're going to do the footer area. But again, remember, we cannot do this. We can't cut that out and use it as the background, because as soon as we have a long tweet or something and this information extends below the brown, it's going to look strange. So I want to make sure that I have a wrapping element here so that this brown background can extend as much as it needs to. And if you don't understand what I mean by that right now, you will when we start working on the CSS. So let's go here. We're done with our aside, so get rid of that. And now we can begin. So I'm going to create a wrapping div, and I'll give it a name of footer wrap. And this is going to wrap our footer itself. So notice that I used a div for the wrapping and the footer for the actual element. And the general rule is when you need an element purely for the reason of helping out with layout, in that case you use a div. All right? So this footer needs to have, and let's come back and work through this again, it needs to have 3 columns. So we'll add class names with the 960 framework later. But for now, I know I need to have 3 sections. So we'll do section times 3. All right. So the first one is going to be our form. So we'll begin by saying h3 get a free quote. All right. What next? So now we need a form, and let's extend that right now. All right. And this form needs a 2 text box, a text area, and another text box. So let's say input type equals text, and the value, and this first one is going to be your name. And then, why don't I just duplicate this? And the next one is going to be your email. And then we have one more, and your time scale. Your time scale. Now we should also give these, so for now we'll say name, email, timescale. Now I also need to get that text area as well right here, and that needs the text area element. So text area, and the value was your project details. All right, and for now we'll say project details for the name, but you can change that later if you need to. All right, that should be fine there, and then we finally have this button at the bottom, so I'll make sure that I add that as well. Submit. All right, that looks good here. So now let's work on the next section. And this will be the recent projects. H3, recent projects. And what do we have here? So we have just a list of links mostly. So we'll use an unordered list for that. And we'll have 4 of them. And each one is going to have an anchor tag, again, wrapping an image. So image, source, and we'll give it an alt. And each one of these will do the same just for now. Looks good to me. And then links nowhere. The first one will say image. We'll say recent project 1. Next one will be recent project 2. Recent project 3. And then the final one, recent project 4. And again, we can change these if we need to. So that should take care of it. And then finally, we have that portfolio button. And I'm going to add that as well. Like so. All right, now let's take care of that last one. So let's see. We have the Twitter stream. And what else do we have? So we have, again, these are just lists. It's just a list of tweets. So I'm going to do a UL. And how many did he have here? He had 3 of them. So we'll do li times 3. And each one will have a p. And I'll just give it some of that generic lorem text as well. And that should be good. The only thing I want to add here, though, is, you see this right here? The time. Again, for now, we could use something specialized, but I don't want to confuse you too much. So let's just use a span here. And that'll wrap a tag, an anchor tag. And it'll link nowhere. And we'll say 5 hours ago via TweetDeck. Now, if you wanted, you could also make TweetDeck a link to their website as well. But we're not going to worry about this too much for now. So let's grab all of that. I'm just going to copy it, paste it in, and now we have our tweets. So we need that one last button for follow us. So I'll add that. All right, so let's scroll down a little bit more. And the final thing we have here is just the site info. And that contains the copyright and then a menu again. So I'll add that after the footer is closed, after our footer wrap, and we'll call this div site info. And this div will begin by having a paragraph, and it's copyright 10. And then we have website name. And then he has all rights reserved. All right, that looks good to me. So I'm going to go ahead and extend that. And then also I want to make sure that I have this navigation area. But there's no need to duplicate this again when we've already done it once at the very top. So let's just simply go up there and grab it again like so. So we'll come up here and paste it in. There we go. So let's go into Firefox and see what we have. So we have our heading, we have our links, we have our social links, we have our form, we have the banner, and then we have all of our articles. Then we have the aside section with the categories, archives, who we are, sponsors. We have our free quote section, recent projects, the Twitter stream, and then we have our bottom footer area. And believe it or not, that takes care of all of the markup that we have to do. Now what we'll do is later we're going to come back and maybe revise a thing or two. We're going to use one of the new time elements to deal with this stuff right here, one of the new HTML5 elements. And we also might add some new attributes, but that should do it for this first step. So in the next lesson, we're going to work on working with slicing the PSDs as well as learning how to use the 960 grid system. So stay tuned to NetTuts. If it's not already available, stay tuned to NetTouch to watch that next video. All right, guys, I'm Jeffrey Way, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.